Hello, friends. Welcome back to our data analysis in SPSS series. Again, my name is Dr. Lohua Mahmudu. Now, continuing with our series of data analysis in SPSS today, let's look at some inferences we can actually perform if we have some categorical variables. So given a categorical variables or two quantitative data or variable, what are some of the inference we can actually perform? And one of the inference you can actually perform is by looking at whether there is difference between these two categorical variables. In other words, looking at whether there's an association between these variables. Now, one statistical tool you can use in performing this is by using the chi-square test of independence or association between these two categorical variables. So let us look at how can we assess and make conclusion that there is any differences or association or relationship between any two categorical variables. So let's get to it. So now again, we have our data set open. So given our data set, we are going to focus on analyzing sex and then marriage because that's what we've already coded for. So we've coded for sex and marriage. And then if you switch, you can see sex and marriage have been coded after we imported our data into SPSS, our Excel data into SPSS. So now, in order to perform this inference between these two categorical variable or qualitative variable, we go to analyze, and there are so many ways to actually approach this. One of the ways in which we are going to use here, we are going to make use of what is called the cross tab. So you click on descriptive and then you go to cross tabs. So by clicking on the cross tabs, you have this dialog box open for you. So now in this dialog box, now before we want to assess whether there is any association between sex of the student and then the marriage status of the student, that's whether or not the student is married. So we would want to see whether there's any form of relationship between the sex of the student and whether or not the student is married. So now in order to do that, we have the rows and then we have the column. So we have to push our two variables, one under the row and one under column. So under row, let's put the sex of the student, and then under the column, let's put whether or not the student is married. Now, once we are done with this, we first of all, now we would want to know what type of test do we want to perform. Now we want to perform the chi-square test of independence. Now, if you click on exact, there are certain information here. If you want to perform an exact test, you can click on exact test, but let's leave it as asymptotic only. So now let's click on statistics. So once you click on statistics, it gives you the option to choose from the type of test you want to perform. So we want to perform a chi-square test of independence. Now we have other tests you might also want to perform. We have the phi, and then there's a Kramer's V test, which is another test people used to use in finding the relationship or association between categorical variables. So let's leave it at chi-square test. And then we are not interested in actually seeing whether there is any form of correlation. So let's leave it as a test. We click continue. Then if we want to display, let's say, a cluster bar chart. Now a cluster bar chart gives us a combination of the sex of the patients and then whether or not the sex of the student and whether or not the student is married. I'm used to patients because I've been working a lot with health data. So now, in order to display, let's say, a cluster bar chart, we just click on display cluster bar charts. If we don't need it, you just forget about it. And then also we can go to cells. Maybe we would want to display a cross tabulation table which gives us the observed values, and then we would want to know what are the percentage the row percentages, the column percentages, and maybe you would want to also know what are the totals. So now, these are also other information you might want to actually look at. So we also have adjust, standardize, and then standardize. So these are information, but again, we don't actually need much of this information. So let's keep it as looking at for the observe, the row percentage, column percentage, and then the total. Now you click continue. So now we go to OK. So now after going OK, there's the information or the output which have been displayed. So we have the case processing summary, which give you the summary of your data. We have an entire data of 90 students with no missing value, which is good for our analysis. Then also there's the cross tabulation table. So the cross tabulation is giving you the 2x2 or table for sex and then what married. So if you look at no married for male, how many individuals were found as no married, how many individuals were married, and then in terms of their percentages, and then if you go to females, how many of them are married, how many of them are not married, you can also find it here. So now what we want to actually look at most is looking at the test we perform, which is the chi-square test. And we were interested in knowing whether there is association or relationship between these two categorical variables. And in order to do that, these are different type of tests which have been displayed. So we have the Pearson chi-square, which is of course what we are interested in. And then we also have the continuity correction test. We have the likelihood ratio test. We have the Fisher exact test. So our focus is actually going to be on the Pearson chi-square test. So the Pearson chi-square test, what statistic are you going to actually look at to be able to make your conclusion whether or not there is an association between the two given categorical variables? So in order to do that, another Pearson chi-square test, what you are going to look at is you are going to look at the asymptotic significance, and that asymptotic significance, the two-sided. And then under two-sided, you are looking at what? The chi-square test. So this asymptotic significance you see here also represents what we call the p-value. So the p-value, we are going to compare the p-value with what? Any given of level of significance alpha, right? So what is the probability? So we are looking at whether or not there's an association between these individuals. So given that we have a large p-value, which will be greater than any given level of significance like 0.05 or 0.1 or 0.0001, we conclude that we fail to reject the null hypothesis. Given that we have a large p-value, we fail to reject the null hypothesis. Now remember, you only reject the null hypothesis when your p-value is less than your alpha level of significance. So if you have alpha level of significance, let's say 0.05, now this p-value is greater than this alpha level of significance. So as a result, we said we fail to reject the null hypothesis. So once we fail to reject the null hypothesis, what do we conclude? We are now concluding that there is no association between the two variables, or there is no relationship between the two variables. In other words, we can say if you have to use independence, in other words, the two variables are dependent. So there is no differences between them. So now this is a cluster bar chart which was actually displayed. So given this cluster bar chart, we are able to assess how many of the married individuals were male and then what? And female. So we have males here and then we have that of the females here. For each of them, we are able to assess under males how many of them were married, and the females how many of them are married. And these are given as according to what? The counts of the data. So this is how you can actually perform chi-square test to assess the association between any two categorical variables. So I hope you also enjoyed this section, and then you have these two under your belt to be able to assess whether there is any relationship between any two categorical or qualitative data or variable. So I will see you in our next series or section of this data analysis in SPSS. So see you. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.